Hi, my name is Selena, and I'm doing a book tag, and this book tag is called Book Voyage, done by, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, Veridin Reads? I'm not even, you know what, don't even listen to me. I'm just going to link the original video down below. I know I like this booktube channel. I watch it a lot. I should know how to say the name, right? But yeah, it's a fun tag, I thought, and there was some conversation in the booktube community earlier, or later this summer, I'm not quite sure, about diversity on our bookshelf. And then I saw this book tag, and I thought this would be fun because I can see where I'm lacking as far as diversity on my bookshelf, and then I can share also some of the books that aren't, so much centered in Western culture that I do have on my shelf, and see where that takes me. So, yeah, that was pretty much it. The conversation about diversity on the bookshelf, I heard Lizzie Books mentioning this topic, as well as Alan Janey, I believe I'm pronouncing her name right. I could be wrong, but I will link their videos down below as well, dealing with diversity on the bookshelf. So I'm kind of thinking about two different things. I'm doing a book tag, but I'm also trying to figure out how I can have more diversity. Alright, so here we go with the books. So first off is Canada and the States. And so for North America, what I chose were three books. Anne of Green Gables, Canada. Loved this book. I read this book actually as an adult in college. We had to take a YA class to get teaching certification of books that people would probably need to read, and this was one of the books, and I absolutely adored this book. I loved Anne, but I've never read any more of the series. This is the first one in the series. I've only read Anne of Green Gables. So yeah, Anne of Green Gables, Canada. Next is a contemporary American author. This is a nonfiction writer. She's also an actress, but yeah, her name is Susan Isaacs. Angry Conversations with God, and the subtitle is Snarky but Authentic Spiritual Memoir. So I like spiritual memoirs, along the lines of like Eat, Pray, Love kind of thing, Blue Like Jazz. And this was a book that I picked up while after reading those books. I was like, I wanted more spiritual memoirs. Picked this up and thought it was hilarious, very, very funny. The premise is that she is, your average American female on the West Coast, but she becomes sort of disillusioned with her faith after experiencing some pretty bad experiences with men. And some person who, we all have those people who think they have all the answers, right? Kind of expressed to her that, her relationship with God should be kind of like a marriage. And so, being the person she is, she says, well, this is a marriage, we need to go to therapy because this ain't working. And she actually takes God to therapy in this spiritual memoir, Angry Conversations with God. So I thought it was very, 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 very well done, very well written, very funny, and yeah, good book. And my last pick for this area it deals more with the Caribbean islands, and it is Oroonoko by Afra Bean. And she is an author around the 16th century, so she predates Jane Austen, but she was a pretty famous playwright and author during that time. And this is a kind of like a slave memoir. It's supposed to be true stories about a African prince who becomes a slave and is taken to the Americas. And there is also a love story in here as well that drives the plot along. He is in love with a female, and in Africa their love is torn apart, and that kind of leads them into being caught by slave traders and brought to the Caribbean islands, and then they meet up again on the islands. But there we go. I'm going to leave it at that. You need to read it. It's a very good book. It's a very thin book. So, yeah. I thought it was pretty well done. I mean, it's dated, obviously, but for a time when men were the only real prominent writers, I thought Aphra Behn did a really good job telling this very touching story. So yeah, Aphra Behn, Oroonoko. Next is South America, and I only have one pick for South America, so that's a lack that I'm going to have to address. But yeah, I only have one pick, and that is Love in the Time of Cholera by, what's his name? Gabriel Garcia Marquez. Yeah, I picked it up because there was a lot of hype about it. The movie was coming out. This was quite some time ago. I read it, and I did not like it. I don't know. Maybe it was just the hype surrounding the book at the time, or the hype surrounding the author because he's a Nobel Prize winner, I believe. Yeah, it says that on the cover. He's a Nobel Prize winner. I did not like the book. I don't know. It just seemed rambly and self-important about unimportant things, if that makes sense. Yeah. So, but I mean, I understand how some people find this appealing, but it's just not my writing style that I am generally drawn to. So, I feel bad because this is my only pick for South America, and I don't feel it's a very positive pick. And that makes me feel sad. So I'm going to go and move on. Next is Europe and Russia. And so I picked two books. One to represent Europe and one to represent Russia. Because I seem to have a lot of books dealing with that because I'm a Jane Austen fangirl. And I studied English literature. I have a lot of English authors on my shelf. But contemporary English author that I am most fangirling right now is Jasper Ford's The Eyre Affair. I love this series, the Thursday Next series, and this is the first in the Thursday Next series called The Eyre Affair. And yeah, I picked this up and I devoured this book. I destroyed this book literally. It's, you know, if you can see the spine is all warped and bent. I spilled water on this book. I had to sit over the book with the blow dryer and blow dry the book because I did not want to get rid of it because I wrote in it. I have like notes and highlights, and I love this book. I thought this was so funny, and I actually read this coming off of my Harry Potter summer read when I series 1 through 7 of Harry Potter all in one summer, and then I went straight into this, and I was very happy. My fantasy, you know, intake was severe that year, but yeah, this was awesome. It is about a character named Thursday Next. It takes place in the 1980s England, but it's sort of like another dimensional world. It's a parallel world to our own. So things are the same, but things are different. And one thing that's different is that the people there can venture into books. They can interact with the characters in the books beyond the page, you know, or in the page. I'm not sure how to explain that. You're going to have to read the book because he does a better job of explaining it than I do. Jasper Ford's The Eyre Affair. And for my pick for Russia, I picked Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. So yeah, Dr. Zhivago, which I have not read at all. I'm a little intimidated by this book. I'm intimidated by Russian authors altogether. I haven't read Crime and Punishment. I haven't read Anna Karenina, and I haven't read Dr. Zhivago. But I want to. But I'm intimidated. So yeah, Dr. Zhivago. I have this hardcover book, and I like it. It's just pretty, and it's, yeah. One day I'll read it, maybe. So moving along, we're moving to Africa continent and Middle East. And so for that, I have 3 books. I have The Kite Runner, which I adore, by Khaled Hosseini. I'm not sure if I'm saying that name right. I've never really remembered how anyone pronounced his name, so I'm sorry if I'm butchering it. It's not on purpose. But yeah, The Kite Runner, I love this book. I've read it twice and adored it, and the movie came out, watched the movie was very good, but I would recommend the book above the movie, which is usually how it would go, right? So yeah, this story, if you do not know, is about the Afghanistan turmoil before, during the Taliban takeover, pretty much, of Afghanistan, and one family, or community of people struggling to deal with that. And yeah, I adored this book. Cried. This was one of the books that made me cry. One of the very few books that made me cry, and I cried both times reading this book. So I love this book. Next, I have a little-known book by a well-known author, or I consider this a well-known author, H. Rider Haggard, and the book is entitled She. And I had to read this during graduate work, reading Victorian literature. He's an English author, but he writes a lot about like English people going into Middle East and Africa, and this book takes place in Africa, and it is about this mystery surrounding she who must be worshipped, kind of like, it reminded me of Voldemort, he who must not be named. But yeah, she who must be worshipped, and or must be obeyed. Sorry, she who must be obeyed, and the African tribal communities who do things to obey her, and the mystery surrounding it. And I don't remember much else about this book. I remember being very baffled by the book, being at times a little confused by some of the imagery in the book. But yeah, it's interesting to read about colonial Englishmen's ideas about the cultures in which they colonized. They're very interesting reads. And the last one I have for Middle East and Africa is the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. I have not read this book, so I don't have much to say about it. I picked it up because it was an Oprah Book Club book, and yeah, I thought it might be a good read, but I just never started it. But I've kept it, thinking I'm always going to read it. Stay positive. Moving on to Asia, I have just one book to represent that continent, and it's a book that I haven't read. So again, I'm feeling a little sad about this. I have diversity on my shelf, but I'm not reading the diversity. This book right here, Lilla's Feast by Frances Osborne. Yeah. So it takes place in like 19th century China, British colonial China, and yeah. I haven't read it, so I don't know much about it. I can read the back to you, but you can go on Goodreads and read that yourself. And my last book to represent, well, it's going to be my last continent. There are two continents left over, Australia and Antarctica, but I have nothing that takes place in Antarctica, so I am going to end with Australia and Oceania. And this is kind of a cheat. I'm sorry. It's The Book Thief by Marcus Zusak, and I picked this because he is Australian, but the story doesn't take place in Australia. The story takes place in World War II torn Germany. So yeah, but he is Australian. He's an Australian author, but I don't have any books that are set in Australia. So yeah. So thank you for taking this trip around the world with me via my bookshelf. And now that you know and I know where my diversity lacks on my shelf, I hope to improve and maybe do this again with better results. Yeah, so if you feel like you want to do this tag, feel free to. I'm tagging everybody, and I am going to stop now. Okay, bye!